So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you a simple question you can ask yourself to deepen your level of self-knowledge and just overall to help you with your shadow work practice. So shadow work is all about becoming conscious of what you're not conscious of about yourself. So when it's the case that we put elements of ourselves in the shadow, what we do is we go unconscious to those parts. And we usually do that for the sake of maintaining a certain identity or a certain worldview, or to cope with trauma or to cope with unmet needs. And so, for example, if I am trying to identify myself as a good person, I might tend to repress and go unconscious to anything that deviates from the identity of being a good person in the way that I'm defining it. So if I define being a good person as somebody who's really humble, I might sort of repress any part of myself that's not so humble. I might repress and go unconscious to honest evaluations of my own strengths. Or if I define goodness as somebody who's really self-sacrificing in some kind of way, I might go unconscious to my own needs and my own wants because I feel like that gets in the way of my identity of selflessness. Now, sometimes it's the case that when we put elements of ourself in the shadow, we do so in a way that's just kind of unexamined. Like we're not really trying to push it away. It just so happens to get sort of like thrown out like the baby with the bathwater, and we don't necessarily recognize that we've gone unconscious to elements of ourselves. And other times when we push things away into the shadow, we bury them very deeply because they are very intense and difficult to face with. So sometimes we go unconscious to things just because we haven't examined. We don't tend to look in this area of our own selves. Our perspective has become contracted. Other times we push things away because they're too intense to deal with, because there's like some major trauma or major unmet need that's associated with them. And so the question that I'm going to be sharing with you is one that tends to fall into the former category of the unexamined things. So one of the things that can tend to happen is that when it comes to answering the question, what do I really want? We tend to be really focused on the question of what is actually possible. And so that automatically narrows down the range of being able to know what it is that we really want, because we might not necessarily allow ourselves to go off into more fantastical visions of what could be. And so if we have a commitment to staying realistic with our goals and realistic with what it is that we want, immediately that's going to negate so much of what's possible to be wanted. So this gives us motive to repress so much of ourselves in that process. And so with the question that I'm about to share with you, it's one of those where you can really just shine the light where you don't typically shine it. Now, there are exceptions to this. Some people, when asking this question, will find considerable difficulty because there are elements that have to do with something that's very deeply repressed or pushed down underneath the surface. And so I would say, 2 times out of 10, that's going to be the case. And in that case, you'll have to ask yourself, okay, what am I trying to protect myself from to really understand what the block is? But for about 80% of people, and I'm just kind of throwing a number on it, what's going to happen is when you ask this question, it's just going to immediately expand the range of what you're aware of about yourself. And so that question is, if I had all of the money in the world and all of the power in the world, and I had this magic wand where I could manifest anything that it is that I want, and I was guaranteed that nothing bad was going to happen as a result of this manifestation, what would I bring to fruition? And you can answer this question in 2 main ways. One way is to be more realistic about it and think about, okay, what's my most ideal living situation? What's my most ideal career? What's my most ideal relationship? What's my most ideal vehicle? What's my most ideal lifestyle, etc., etc. And there's a lot of value to doing it that way, because oftentimes we can get into this logistical thinking where we start thinking small and we start saying, oh, maybe I don't deserve that, or maybe it's not possible to get that type of thing. So even just doing it the realistic way is something that's going to expand your scope of consciousness about what it is that you really want. But what I find is a really powerful way to approach this that will reveal a lot more about yourself is to be very fantastical with this. So basically it's like, the things that you want to manifest with this magic wand don't even have to make sense in real life or, be in keeping with the laws of physics. So if you wanted to have a pet unicorn on Jupiter, or if you want to fly around in space all day, or if you want to go live with the mermaids, that's a great way to approach this question. And the reason why that's a great way to approach approach this question is because even though the vision is fantastical, it will still tell you a lot about yourself and what it is that you value and what it is that you really want. So for example, I did this exercise once and I had this image of being like a small fairy surrounded by other people who are also small fairies, and we were just dancing around to some music. And of course, not a possible thing to happen, but it was showing me some things that I really wanted. So first off, there was like this connection element and everybody was like on the same wavelength. And another thing about it is that everyone was really, really passionate and really happy and like really, really in the moment. And some of the people that I was surrounded with were like just really, really bright people, so some people that I know from life, and then also some people that are just kind of well-known people in the world. And so this vision, even though it's very unrealistic, was showing me some important things about myself and what it is that I want. So I recommend pondering on this question, write about this question, think about, okay, if I could have everything exactly the way that I want it, in a realistic sense, what would that look like? And if I can have everything that I want in an unrealistic sense, what would that look like? And remember, you have all the money in the world, all the power in the world. Basically, nothing bad is going to happen. You can kind of just snap your fingers, wave the magic wand, and you're going to have whatever it is that you want in this vision. So one thing that's really common, because we as adults have to think very logistically, is oftentimes we'll want to like manifest something like money. But we have to understand with money is that money is always a means to an end. It's always about the power to get something else that we want. And so money is only ever a ticket to somewhere else. And so oftentimes we can get so focused on tickets to somewhere else or the means to the end that we don't think about the end in itself. And so with this question, you can kind of nix the concern about the means and you can focus solely on the ends. And that's the value of this, is that when you're constantly thinking about the means all the time, this puts you in like horse blinders and you lose a lot of self-knowledge through those horse blinders. And so basically it takes these horse blinders off so that you can go, hang on a second, if I could have it exactly the way that I want it to be, how would I have it? When I don't have to think about the logistics, when I don't have to think about the means, I already have this magic wand, I already have all the money in the world, I don't need to manifest any more of that. What is it that I actually want? And I recommend sitting with this question for a bit because it can oftentimes be really difficult to answer that question, what do I really want, when we're used to asking the question, what is it that's possible for me? Now, if you do run into a block and you're not able to access that information, there are probably other blocks that have to be resolved first. Like I said, 2 out of 10 people will experience that. And I'm just throwing numbers on things, but that's just my best guess. But if you happen to run into a block where you can't answer the question, what do I really want if I have a magic wand, and there's some kind of thing where you can't access that information about yourself, then I highly recommend you check out this video right here, which will share with you a little bit more information about shadow work and how to move deeper with this question. And until next time, keep becoming more you.